Hey, what's up guys, Rev here. So earlier this week, Disclosed TV promoted a very controversial article to their over 1 million followers on Twitter. This article, something I covered a few days ago, discusses an alleged predator invasion of Mastodon, an open source software for self-hosted social media alternatives. To make a very long story short, the article cites Vice News' hit piece on the manga industry to support their xenophobic claims that Japan, as the supposed global leader of CP, had hundreds of thousands of its citizens infiltrate Mastodon to spread and normalize this illegal content. Of course, this content did not feature real children. Rather, the content this article was referring to was fictional content like IoIicon, Shotokan, and alike. Unsurprisingly, my video debunked the misinformation and other reckless claims that article attempted to make, but some people actually supported its various messages, or at the very least, bought into their claims. A few days ago, the lads over at the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, a conservative channel, tried to tackle this issue for their over 300,000 subscribers. Now, for clarity's sake, I don't care if you're left-leaning, right-leaning, or somewhere in between. All I care about is the merit of what you say. And in their attempt to tackle these subjects that they clearly knew nothing about, Harry and Connor managed to spread a whole host of misinformation in the span of only a few minutes as they talked about the fictional content aspect of this whole situation. Something that was pointed out by their viewers because 90% of the comment section is pointing out their mistakes. So with over 60,000 views on the video, it's important to address a few things, so let's focus on the relevant clips for the purposes of this video. So looking at their title, there's something I think we can all agree to, in that the only push predators should have is into a wood chipper. But let's make sure we're talking about actual predators and not people interested in fictional content. But let's hear what they have to say about this issue.
On the platform, it turned out that 3 of the top 5 communities on the platform were hosted in Japan and represented about 60% of users. Mastodon being skinned to look like Twitter, one of the most popular social media platforms in Japan, and Japanese authorities beginning to crack down on CP in 2016 following the passage of a law in 2014 to make the material illegal. So CP in Japan, and this is actual people, not just cartoons and such, actual people, was only made illegal in 2014. And you've got to recognize as well that Japan's age of consent laws is 13 years old. That's the...
Okay, so there's already a couple of things that need to be corrected. Number one, the last thing they said about the age of consent being 13. While it is true that the federally set minimum age is 13, all of the Japanese prefectures are allowed to set the age for themselves, where virtually every single one has set the age to be between 16 to 18, much like other countries. In fact, there's only one prefecture in all of Japan that has that minimum 13 years old, and it's a remote island inhabited by about 5 residents. It's kind of a meme to refer to that whole age of consent being 13 because that's the only one. It works a lot like the United States, where the federally set age is 18, but the states are allowed to set it lower, kind of the reverse of Japan, where most states end up between 16 to 18, just like Japan. And the second thing they said about the possession of CP being banned, it is true. Like, I share the same level of disgust that it wasn't until 2014 that possession of CP was made illegal in Japan. But I do think it is important to observe the fact that the production and sale of this was already illegal by the 90s. Again, doesn't make it look too much better, but I think that's something to keep in mind. But I want to stop here and remind us where we are. We are talking about fictional content. This article brings up real-life CP and all these things and these laws to give you an idea that they're talking about real people and not drawings. And these guys fell for it. So they're talking about these things because we're talking about age of consent, and then we're talking about drawings. I don't know about you, but I don't know any drawings, lolly or not, that have the ability to consent. It just makes no sense. And in terms of the illegal CP they're referring to in the laws, again, doesn't apply to anything we're talking about because it's fictional drawings.
the age of consent legally in Japan. It was very, very disturbing. And then they only decided to crack down on it about 2.5 years after the law was passed in the first place. Not looking great. SecJuice wrote that the majority of CP makers in the country moved to Mastodon to avoid being reported to the police. SecJuice wrote that the catalyst for the wave of CP postings of April 2017 could be likely be traced back to Pixiv, a popular lolicon photo hosting website, with the name being derived from the novel Lolita when the website joined Mastodon.
So, right off the bat, if you know anything about Pixiv, you know that's completely wrong. So Pixiv is essentially Japan's version of DeviantArt, or something similar to it. It is just a art sharing platform. In fact, calling it a lolicon website is completely wrong. I would go as far as to say lolicon is a dying breed on Pixiv. They have been cracking down more and more on that material, and in the past couple of months they've been expressing that they want to make changes to that due to pressure being applied to them from payment processors like Visa and MasterCard, who are trying to rid many different services of that type of content. So that one's a pretty obvious one that they got wrong here. But this next part, I think, is the most wild part of this reaction. You just got to listen to it. Let Connor speak for a minute.
But those that are inevitably going to put some kind of defense of, oh, it's just a drawing, bro, in our comments. No. A drawing is a representation of reality. You are normalizing something to yourself. You have a perverted fetish that you really should abandon because it's going to harm somebody eventually, or is at least degrading and debasing your soul. Stop trying to defend it. It is indefensible. You could do better. Do it.
So besides sounding like the biggest boomer ever, there's a lot to unpack there, okay? So let's start with the "it's just a drawing, bro" argument. It is a very valid argument. Number one, it is factually true. These are just drawings. But the reason this is always brought up is because it's used to mock people who treat drawings like real people. You see it on Twitter all the time. People complaining about lolicon, bringing up topics like age of consent when you're talking about drawings. Yes, it's important to point out it's just drawings because these people apply real life standards to fiction. You know, the whole point here is that we have to treat fiction and reality differently, especially from a moral standpoint. We don't treat murder in a video game the same way morally as we do a real-life murder. So how is lolicon or anything fictional somehow different from that or special? And the whole "this leads you down a bad road" argument, I would like to see any evidence or study to support that claim. It's not out there. Believe me, I've dealt with a million different people trying to demonize lolicon as something that leads to real-life predatory behavior, and nobody, no matter how desperate, can find a single thing to back them up other than just citing their own feelings and personal discomfort with the topic. And for anyone who's new, especially anyone who's new to this channel, I want to make my point very clear about this stuff. You are 100% right to find lolicon, Shotacon, anything like it, disgusting. You can think people who like it are degenerates, weirdos, whatever. But that personal disgust should not allow you to make ridiculous claims with no support, like claiming that Japan is the leader of CP or that it leads to real-life offending or things like that. You shouldn't be able to say that just because of your discomfort, let alone call people predators over these things. It's all from a personal disgust of the genre as a whole. And you're entitled to it, but think a little more critically about what we're doing here. This whole article was structured in a way to rile you up about real issues like CP and bringing in laws and age of consent, all those things, and then they pivot to what they're really talking about, which is fictional content. I get the outrage over everything else, but once we're using that to mask that this whole thing is about drawings, that's where we draw the line. That's why it's important to talk about these things and actually get a sense of what really is the story here when you're dealing with a topic that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. These things do not normalize anything, and I get accused of trying to normalize lolicon by defending it. I am in no way trying to normalize a fetish, okay? I just don't think people should be unfairly accused based on this. That's all there is to it. So these guys, I mean, they have a successful podcast and show here, so they clearly say a lot of things people agree with, but from this and other sources, whenever fictional content comes out, I think you guys should just give it a pass, you know? But if you really feel like you have to say something at the very least, maybe give Connor the day off, because he was doing most of the talking and he doubled down on Twitter and everyone was just eviscerating him on Twitter. And it's like, again, I get your personal discomfort, but maybe sit out of these fictional content debates, because the comment section, Twitter, everywhere you're going with these things, no one is agreeing with you, not even your own audience, okay? So maybe just sit that next one out. But nonetheless, I hope this video was at least a little bit informative on various subjects and a reminder of where I stand on a lot of these things. You know, yes, let's push those predators to hell. I agree. Perfect. I think we can all agree on that at least when we walk away from this. But not confusing them with people who have interests in fictional content. That's going to do it for this video. Please let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comment section down below. And I'll see you guys next time.